You ever stop and wonder how our world actually stays organized? I mean, think about it. From the traffic laws you follow every day to these huge global trade deals, it all boils down to two kinds of rules. They're both super powerful, but they're also really, really different. So today, we're going to break down this whole idea of national versus international law. All right, so what is the real difference here? I know, it sounds pretty simple on the surface, right? But trust me, getting this is the key to understanding, well, pretty much everything, from what's happening in your local city council to those big global summits you see on the news. So, let's get into it. Okay, first things first, let's start with what we all know, what's closest to home. We're going to unpack national law, the rules that shape our everyday lives right here within our own country. So, what exactly is national law? Well, the official definition is pretty straightforward. It's the law of a country or jurisdiction. Simple, right? But don't let that fool you. All the real power, all the meaning is packed right into those last few words. Yeah, that phrase, of a country or jurisdiction, that's everything. Think of it like a giant fence made of words. It basically says that these laws have total, absolute authority, but only up to the border. The second you step outside that line, poof, their power just vanishes. So, what does that actually look like in practice? Well, the scope is totally internal. These laws apply to literally everyone and everything inside that country. We're talking you, me, the corner store, big corporations, even the government itself has to follow them. The best way to picture it? Just think of it as the house rules for one single nation. And when you're under this roof, these rules are king. Period. Okay, so we've got the house rules down. But what happens when all the different houses on the block need to agree on something? Like where to put the stop signs or who's responsible for the park in the middle. That right there is where we step into the world of international law. And boom, here's our second big definition. International law is, quote, the law governing the relations of countries or the citizens of countries. See that? See the instant shift in focus. We're not talking about what happens inside the house anymore, are we? This really gets to the core of it. International law isn't about what's happening inside a country's walls. No, it's the bridge that connects them. It's the shared language they use for diplomacy. It's the rulebook for how they trade with each other. And sometimes it's the emergency brake they pull to stop a conflict. So its scope is totally external. It mainly applies to countries themselves and big international groups, like the UN or the World Trade Organization. And a really great way to think about this one is as the rules of the road for the entire global community. It's what tells countries how to behave when they're interacting with each other, so they don't, crash into each other. All right, so we've looked at the house rules and the rules of the road separately. Now it's time to put them side by side, because this is where the difference becomes, well, crystal clear. The entire difference really just boils down to a couple of small words. National law is the law of a country. It's possessive, right? It's all about control within. But international law, that governs the relations of countries. It's all about the connection between them. It's like one looks in the mirror and the other looks out the window. And this table here just gives us another way to look at it. Check out the domain row. National law, it operates within a country's borders. International law, it operates between countries. Simple enough. But now look at authority. This is a big one. National law is usually top-down. The government makes a rule, and that's that. But international law, that's built from the ground up. It's all based on promises, on handshakes, on treaties that countries voluntarily choose to sign. Okay, look, definitions are great and all, but why should you actually care about any of this? Why does this whole distinction matter outside of, a law school textbook? Well, let's talk about the real-world impact, because there's a lot of it. Because here's the thing. These two systems are constantly bumping up against each other out in the real world. Every time you hear about a global climate agreement or a heated debate at the UN or a big trade dispute, those aren't just headlines. They are live, happening right now negotiations over where one country's house rules stop and the global rules of the road take over. And that right there brings us to our final and maybe the most important question of all. This is where things get really complicated and honestly really fascinating. This constant conflict, this clash between a nation's right to make its own house rules and its responsibility to follow the global rules of the road, that's the source of some of the absolute biggest political and ethical debates of our time. And that tension, that's something we're thinking about long after this is over.